Namo Tassa. May I introduce the professor today in a brief. Professor Sondan Kessler in a Hungarian native. He became a monk in 1992. In 2004, he became a lecturer teaching Buddhist ethics meditation techniques. In 2003, Sondan began to practice in the international Sokehan community under guidance of Selayan Namkhai Natu Rinpoche. In 2010, he became a Vajradhan and Yanda Yoga instructor in the international Dorchen community. 2008 and 2016, he served as the Vice Director of Education at Tamakit Buddhist College. So now he is as Vice Director of Education in Tamakit Buddhist College. So right now, may I invite the professor to give a lecture to us today.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation for the whole MCU and also the welcome the most vulnerables, and all the students and of the Buddhist Studies faculty or also the Peace Studies faculty. So this lecture will be about how the Tipitaka is a key for practice and how the Tipitaka is a key for understanding the Buddhist path. First of all, it's always very good to remind us how the Buddha attained enlightenment. So, as we all know, that one of the most extraordinary quality of the Buddhist path is the so-called middle way. And there are many different levels how we can understand the middle way. Of course, from the life or story of the Buddha, we understand that the middle way is between, first of all, is between the like delighting the senses and between restraints of the senses. So between enjoyment of life and between the great suffering of practice or austerities. And this is the how the, for example, the first teaching of the Buddha starts. So try to find the middle way between livelihood. But we have also the middle way in meditation. We have also the middle way in the view of Buddhist view is called the middle view. And also we have many aspects of the middle way, like the Eightfold Noble Path is also a middle way. It means that it is between all the aspects of the Eightfold Path, is between something two extremes. So when we see the life of the Buddha from this viewpoint, then we can clearly understand that what are the two extremes. The first one is living like a prince, like living like delighting all the senses, doing everything for happiness, for enjoyment. And then on the other hand is living uh, uh, like a yogi, so living like a person who are not eating, not sleeping, so reducing all the enlightenment, all the happiness of the senses as much as possible. And then discovering between the two is a great discovery, because that time, in the time of the Buddha, this was the two ways how people were thinking about going beyond the samsaric situation. One is being a king, like a universal monarch. It's like being in the center of the samsara. And then the other one is reducing all the enjoyment, all the happiness, all things, and it's what called the great suffering. And sometimes there was some practices which was for the five fire, and is still alive in India, where yogi is sitting in center of four fires, and then the fifth fire is sun. And they believe that by this suffering of fire, so being in extreme heat from all the corners, four corners, and also from above, is possible to burn out karma or burn out kamma. And then, so this way, attaining liberation. And the Buddha discovered that both of this kind of solution is not good, it's not valid, it's not giving the fruit of liberation. So finding the middle way is really one of the most important thing in if we consider Buddhism. And it's sometimes it's not so easy to understand what are the extremes, what is in between. Just like one example, in Tibetan yogic tradition, it's very important the middle between the awakening state or what we are now and then the dream state. So to find what is in the middle. Also, in some cases, it's very important what is in middle of thought and non-thought. So there are many, many levels when in Buddhism, and we have to understand that what is in the middle. Some, for example, some breathing techniques is very important also in Buddhism, to find what is in between the inhalation and exhalation, what is in between the exhalation and inhalation. So there are many practical levels when we have to understand that what is the middle, how we can conduct our behavior, how we can, um, like, for example, deal with our senses in the middle way, how we can deal with our thoughts in the middle way. So there are many, many levels. So if we find and what are the two extremes in our life, whether we are monks or we are lay people, then we can have a clear understanding that what is the middle way. So discovering the middle way is one of the key factors to understanding all the different aspects of Buddhist practices and then also the Buddhist path. And this is, we cannot find it in any religion. So this is one key factor when we are studying the life of the Buddha. And then there is an interesting description. It's mostly found in the Tibetan sources. It's called the four periods of enlightenment, which is very interesting because we can understand that how these four aspects, which we call now the Four Noble Truths, is appearing in the practical level also. So they describe that the four periods of enlightenment was starting in the afternoon, and this is connected to the truth of suffering, and this is connected to when the mind is turning outside. So then there is also the description of the four maras, and in the Tibetan sources you can find the correspondence. One of the mara is connected to the one of the periods. So, for example, the Mrityu Mara, so the Mara of the death, is connected to the first period when the Buddha was seeing how all the outer object of senses are impermanent, how they are trying to arise desire in the mind. And then in the second period, which is connected to the ninth and like, for example, the north, is connected to causes of suffering. So experiencing what are the obstacles on the path. And then of course there are different levels of the obstacles. Sometimes equal 4, sometimes equal 3. So these are the causes of suffering. These are the sources of samsara. And then the third period, which is connected to the dawn, so the early morning, is when the light is starting to manifest. This is also a very significant point of the enlightenment of the Buddha. And then also the fourth period, which is attaining the full enlightenment, which is going beyond or like destroying the different knowledge or the avidya, the levels of avidya, the levels of ignorance, which is obscuration for enlightenment. So when we understand that how the Buddha attained enlightenment by way of four periods, by way of understanding the different maras, then we can understand also that what we have to do also, what we have to go through also when we are practicing meditation. Because, for example, when somebody is starting to practice meditation, usually the problem is that all the mind is turning outside. The mind is thinking, judging, turning outside. And then also we have problem with the body, pain in the body. So these experiences are part of the path, and we have to overcome these experiences. So if we understand that how the Buddha attained enlightenment, then we can also understand that why it is four aspects of reality. When the Buddha was talking about the Four Noble Truths, sometimes truths such can have the meaning of truth, but also we can understand by way of reality. So if we are traversing, or we are firmly on the path of the middle way, then we go through the four levels of reality. And it's interesting because mostly in Tibetan sources we can find that they call the first two truths the truth of karma. So the first noble truth and the second noble truth, and they call it the truth of karma. The first noble truth, the truth of suffering, is called the truth of karma as a result. And then we can say also the truth of karma of the causes. This is the second noble truth. So this is a very interesting way of understanding the Four Noble Truths. The first two is a way of seeing karma, seeing as a result, and then by seeing the result we can understand the causes. So, like for example, my teacher Chögyallam Kainurgu Rinpoche always explained that actually seeing suffering, seeing this unbalanced way, because the dukkha has many meanings, also can sometimes nowadays they translate as stress, sometimes translated as unbalanced way, so out of balance, or sometimes it's translated as suffering, but the dukkha has many more meanings, just if you say suffering. So this is a result. This we have experienced. And then how Rinpoche was explaining, he said that the suffering from the viewpoint of the path has only one reason to discover the causes. So when we have pain, when we have suffering, when we have the unbalanced state, when we have stress, then from the viewpoint of the teaching, the only purpose of suffering is understanding the causes. So from the first level of reality, suffering, to understand and go to the second level of reality when we clearly see the causes. There are many ways of describing the causes. If we say like tanha or trishna, so we can say that the thirst or desire. And sometimes they are calling two causes, like avijja and tanha, so ignorance and desire. Sometimes they are three, avijja and then also desire and hatred. And sometimes we have also the four, which is called the four obscuration. And this four also we can find in the Pali text, like the four yogas. So there is a very small sutta, the Yoga Sutta in Pali canon, when there are different yogas, the Kama Yoga, and then also the Bhava Yoga, or there is also Ditthi Yoga, and also the Avijja Yoga. So these are the bondages, these are the obstacles on the path, these are the causes of suffering. And then the third and the fourth truth is called in Tibetan, some Tibetan sources, the truth of Dharma, truth of Dhamma, or truth of Dharma. And the first aspect is the eliminating the causes. So that we have also in Pali text, we have also the five pahana, how to eliminate the causes, different ways of eliminating the causes, and then the truth of the path. So actually, at the end of the Four Noble Truths, the four realities, we attain the path that leads to enlightenment. So if we consider the path, usually we have two aspects of the path. One viewpoint is from the viewpoint of the middle way, is the Eightfold Noble Path. It's interesting that the Eightfold Noble Path, like there is the Big 40, so a sutta, and also in the Pali text, and also there are some texts in Mahayana. when they consider that the Eightfold Path have many aspects. Or the Eightfold Path has an aspect of like concerning ethics. And this is in the Big 40 Sutta, it's called that it's leading to better rebirth. But then there is also the Eightfold Path, which is leading to full liberation. So also the Eightfold Path have levels we can consider. And it's interesting that in Mahayana text, the Eightfold Path is connected to Vipassana. So it's very interesting. I was also very much surprised when I found, like in a dictionary of Kavapaltsag, this is a very early Tibetan translation text. It's Dharma dictionary. And then here the Eightfold Path is connected to levels of Vipassana. We know that there are 12 jnanas in Vipassana, but here it's connected to more to the 8 levels of Noble Eightfold Path. So this is also one aspect. And the other aspect is the three trainings. So if we say that whatever jnana we consider in Buddhism, like Theravada or Mahayana, Zen, the Vajrayana, and even also there is the Dzogchen now is very popular in the West, then all has the three trainings. So the three trainings we know very well is the Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. And these three trainings are the steps of also the path. So when we start any practice, first of all, we need Sila. We need something, we need rules. We need how to sit, how to practice, what to do at the beginning of the practice, what to do at the end of the practice, how to conduct life. And of course, if we are monk, then we need the Vinaya, we need the rules of the livelihood, the rules which is always reminding us of impermanence, the rules which is always reminding us not to satisfy our desire, not to satisfy our senses, and the rules to turn away from samsara. So the Vinaya, or we can say the Sila, is dealing with craving, desire, attachment, and we can say that later we will understand it more and more clearly that also the Tipitaka is connected to these three trainings, which is extraordinary. So when we are considering the different religions, what we have like Christianity and Muslim and so many different religions, Buddhism is extraordinary because in the sacred text of Buddhism, the collection, different collections, how the Buddha teachings were rendered in different pitakas, so basket, is extraordinary because they are connected to the teaching, they are connected to the path. So actually, it's not like life stories or different stories and so on, but they are very clearly connected to our path. So that's really one of the most important aspects of we can say like the first sentence in concerning Tipitaka, that it's connected to the path, it's connected to the practice. So then this is the three trainings. The three trainings is the most important key factor of the path of the Buddha. So the first one is Sila, and then we can eliminate craving, desire, and attachment, and it's connected to Vinaya text. And the Samadhi is connected to hatred and anger, and this is connected to, of course, the different meditation methods. And then this is connected more to the Sutta Pitaka, so the discourses of the Buddha, and the Panya, the wisdom, is eliminating ignorance and delusion, and this is more connected to the collection of Abhidhamma. So this is like just a kind of preliminary understanding that how, for example, in the Northern Buddhism is very clearly connected the three baskets to the three trainings. So when the Buddha passed away, so after the Parinibbana, then we know very well that the first council was led by Kassapa, and then the 500 arhats, and they were putting together the teachings of the Buddha into the Vinaya basket. And Vinaya is mostly about the monastic code, and these are the rules of the Sangha. And also interesting to see that in Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the Buddha was asked about that. What about the monastic situation? What about the rules? And then the Buddha is clearly saying that now the Sangha is deciding the rules. Now the monastic code, the Vinaya, is these teachings are connected to keeping together the Sangha. And also it's very important that the continuity of the monastic codes, the continuity of Vinaya. So there were also the Vinaya masters. So there are some very interesting stories about how the Vinaya masters what were the purpose of being a Vinaya master. And then the second, the discourses of the Buddha was so it's connected to the Dhamma, and that was the Dhamma masters. In the early periods, the Buddhist teaching was called the Dhamma Vinaya. So actually, this is like the essence of the teaching of the Buddha. There were the Vinaya, which is connected to the rules, the monastic rules of the Sangha. This is like the shelter. This is like a base for the starting point. And then it's called the nectar is the Dhamma, the teaching and also the practices. So these two aspects we can also see when, for example, when we are lighting an incense, is more connected to the Vinaya. When we are lighting the candle, is more connected to the light of Dhamma. So also when we are even we do the very simple practice of doing a meditation, and before that we are burning incense and then also the candle. This represents these two aspects of the Vinaya and the Dhamma, or the rules, and also the teachings and the practices. So the question of Abhidhamma is always an interesting aspect. Why Abhidhamma we have, and but we can say that if the Buddha was still on this planet and still among the disciples, then the teaching of the Buddha was the Dhamma Vinaya. We can say also the Buddha Dhamma Vinaya. So this three aspect is also reflected in the discourses, and also there are many explanations how Abhidhamma was coming, because in the first council after the Parinibbana of the Buddha, we have just the collection of the monastic codes. That was the leading monk of Upari was like collecting and responsible for that, and the discourse of the Buddha, Ananda, was remembering all the discourse of the Buddha. But later also the Abhidhamma was connected. We don't know exactly in what time. Some explanation says that this is much more connected to Sariputta, so the school of Sariputta. But the Abhidhamma is like key to understand the suttas. So the Abhidhamma, we can find the main terms, because the Buddha was using different way the terms of, like if we say in Pali, or when we are going to the Sanskrit text, then the other teachers. So also it was necessary to have a compilation of texts of explaining the terms, explaining what we see in the suttas. And then the Abhidhamma was the collection of the Abhidhamma. The Pitaka was also the starting point of the different Buddhist philosophies. So when now we are talking about like Yogacara philosophy, or Madhyamaka philosophy, or Vaibhasika philosophy, or Sautantrika philosophy, then it's all coming from the Abhidhamma. So the philosophy was like a starting point of Abhidhamma. So right after the Parinibbana of the Buddha, then there was the compilation of the text was based on the three trainings. So the monastic code connected to Sila, the rules, the behavior of monks, and we will see that how, for example, if we try to see the essence of Vinaya Pitaka, Tipitaka, Abhidhamma Pitaka, what are the key factors of this collection? And then the discourse of the Buddha, the Sutta Pitaka, is the source of all the Dhamma. So these are all the teachings of the Buddha. And then, of course, there is the Abhidhamma, which is a kind of unusual way because we don't see that Ekam Samayam or Evame Suttam. So we don't see in front of the text this. So, but we will see it a little bit later that. So right after the Parinibbana of the Buddha, we can see that the canon, the sacred text of the Buddha, the teachings of the Buddha rendered into three baskets. And it's very clearly connected to the aspect of the past, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, so the three trainings. So when we are now trying to find out that how and why there are different Buddhist schools, then in historical accounts, we find that at time there were 18 different schools. So it seems that, and these are connected to the different councils, the second council, the third, the fourth, and fifth, and so on, and also the sixth council of the Sangha. But if we are trying to find which way the schools were different after the passing away of the Buddha, then the first one is mostly about the monastic code. So again, if we see the Sila Samadhipanna, or we are seeing the Tipitaka as the Vinaya, the Sutta and Stanta, and also Abhidhamma, we can see that the schools of the Buddhism or Buddha were like separated because they were not agreeing. The different teachers, different masters were not agreeing on some points of Vinaya, some points of monastic codes, and then developed six kind of Nikayas. And they were very, very, very separated. Nikayas usually if we see the Patimokkha, we can find that there are very slight differences, but in the life of monks, these differences are really important. So the Nikayas are very much separated, and nowadays we can find just from the six we can find the three ones, so the Theravada Nikaya, and then also the Tibetan, we can say the Sarvastivada Nikaya, and also the Upagupta we can find in the Chinese system mainly. Other three, they are not alive now. So they are the differences between the monastic codes, and that is why we can find sometimes, for example, in Theravada, we have 227 different monastic rules, but in Tibetan Buddhism there are 256. And also there are differences in numbers. So these are the differences between the Nikayas. This is really, in the ancient time, it was quite problematic that which you belong to which Nikaya. Also, we have now this kind of differences. And the second one is the differences in Suttanta Pitaka or Sutta Pitaka, and these are the Vadas, the different teaching systems, how the different schools are considering that which is more important, which is not so important, the different Vadas, like Theravada, the teaching of the old, the Theravada ancient teaching, and there were different Vadas. And even now in Theravada system, we can find that some of the monastic traditions are highlighting. So they are keeping or the most important, the Vinaya. Like, for example, the Amaravati school, the school of Achancha, where they're also very important, the Vinaya. Vinaya is very much this is like the strongest we have to keep. But there are also some schools where meditation is the most important. And also there are some schools like in Burma where also the Abhidhamma is the most important. So there are these kind of slight differences. And then the connected teachings, they have these are different Vadas. And also we have the different schools concerning the philosophies. So that is why it's very good to understand that that when we are talking about Buddhist school, that to see that which Nikaya, which Vada, and which philosophy is connected to that. There are the Abhidhamma schools, there are the Vaibhashika schools, and there is a Sautantrika, they are accepting the sutras. So there are also long stories that how the different Buddhist philosophies appeared, and mostly in the northern schools of Buddhism, we have also like in Tibetan, we have also the Yogacara schools, philosophical schools. They have different Abhidhamma interpretations, how they are concerning the different dhammas, and also the Madhyamaka. And they are also giving different methods. So there is a Yogacara meditation, also the Madhyamaka meditation. Also, there is the way of how the things are considered like we can also see a Dhamma through meditation, and also we can examine a Dhamma through logic. So there was also different logic schools, and there were concerning that how logic and meditation are connected. So we can have also this kind of understanding. There is also the Tathagata Garbha school, when they are talking about mostly the sutras, also talking about the state of enlightenment. And there are also the Prajnaparamita school, when they are talking about most the essencelessness, so the sunyata or shunyata, about emptiness. So this we can understand that they were different schools, and then there were the combinations, that one school was connected to this Nikaya, they were considering this Vada, and they were accepting this and this philosophies. So when we are trying to see that how the different schools in Buddhism were developing from each other, then we can understand through these three, again, we have the three, through the Vinaya, through the Suttanta or Sutta, and through Abhidhamma. Because Abhidhamma is the source, as I said, of different Buddhist philosophies. It's very interesting because we have the four seals, and the fourth seal in a Mahayana system is connected to a very short sutra when the Buddha was teaching to a Naga king. And of course, these four seals, we have also the three one in Dhammapada, when Sabbe Sankara Anicchati, Sabbe Sankara Dukkati, Sabbe Dhamma Anatta. So these three, which is the Anicca Dukkha Anatta, these are called, and then the Nibbana at the end is called the four seals. And all the philosophical schools in Buddhism are trying to research the dharmas according to these four. So how the things are impermanent, how the things have a birth, then it's dying. If there is rising, there is collapse. There is, if collect is something, then it's also spreading away. So these are considering the dhammas from the viewpoint of the first seal or anicca, and then also the dukkha, how the things are defined and causes suffering, and how we find clear dhamma. So they are considering this according to that. So when we study the Buddhist philosophies, it's very good to know that the starting point is always that how we consider the different dhammas from the viewpoint of anicca, dukkha, and then how from the viewpoint of anatta. As we see later also, the Theravada Abhidhamma, the main purpose of the Theravada Abhidhamma is to see clearly the nature of anatta. So these are the three kind of key if we are talking about different Buddhist schools, and this, of course, after the passing away of the Buddha, the Parinibbana, through the Nikaya, Vadas, and the philosophies. These are all connected also, the three main baskets. So if you consider there were many different schools in Buddhism, so historically when we are trying to have a research of Tipitaka, then we find very complicated things in history. So we find that there were, in the time of Bhutan Rinchen Druk, he was a Tibetan scholar, and he was a very great scholar also of Sanskrit. And he was one of the compilers. He was like responsible to putting together the Tibetan canon, so the Kanjur and the Tanjur. And then he wrote that he found sources when there were 18 different Tipitakas. Why? Because there was the Nikayas, the Vadas, and the different philosophical systems. And later, in the time of Xuan Zhang, he wrote that he knew about 7 types of Tipitaka or Tripitaka, because also there were existing Sanskrit canons, so Tripitaka. But now the Tripitaka are, we have just fragments of the Tripitaka, different Tripitakas. But now we have 3 main canons. So there were many, like 18 types, and then with 7 times of it. No, we have main 3. It means that these 3 canons are the sources of the different translations. So we know very well that, for example, the Pali canon is the sources of the different translation of, like, the Thai translation also. So the most of the Theravada countries are all are based on the Pali canon, so the Tipitaka. And in the Pali canon, as we know, the Tipitaka is we have the 3 baskets, Pitakas. The first one is Vinaya Pitaka, the Sutta Suttanta Pitaka, and Abhidhamma Pitaka. And this is considered the most ancient canon. It's the story is going back to Sri Lanka when it was compiled and translated before, so it was more than 2,100 years ago. And then the second one, the second oldest one, is the Peiqing canon, the Chinese canon. But in the Peiqing canon, there are also some very old texts translated in Chinese. So sometimes when there is problematic things in the Pali canon, sometimes they are also going to the Chinese canon to see that how was it translated, how that time in the first century, for example, they were considering and translated into Chinese. Sometimes it can give also interesting plus for example, if you see that in Pali Canon we have 2 Satipatthana Sutta, Mahasatipatthana Sutta, but in the Chinese canon there are much more. Even we have, I think, 4 or 6 different Satipatthana versions, and there is also some scholars who are dealing with in the studying the different differences between the different Satipatthanas. For example, in the Pali Satipatthana, the Kayanusati, so the observing or focusing on the body, there are the 6 Kayanusatis, but here the first one is breathing. So this is also how connected to Anapanasati. So this one is first starting with the breathing, but in some Chinese Satipatthana, the first one is connected to the body. So it's also very interesting to see why here is starting with the breathing and then ending with the 9 levels or nine stages of death. And it's also a very interesting question. I don't know, I didn't see any explanation for that, but it's very interesting that life, when we are alive, is starting with breathing and ends with death. So it's very interesting to see these 6 stages also connected somehow, we can say, to the stages of our life, because we are starting everything also with inhalation, with breathing. This is life, and then at the end is death. So there is also a Mahamudra practice where is all the 6 phases of the Kayanusati is we can see or observe in one breath. So starting with inhalation, and then at the end of exhalation, we are visualizing our body as a corpse. So this is also I was very surprised because I also am very much interested in different Satipatthana styles. Also, I saw many versions in Theravada system, but there are also some versions in like in Korea and also Japan and also in Tibet, which are really very very interesting. So there are differences between the different like Satipatthana or in Sanskrit Smriti Upasthana sutras. and it's sometimes it's really very good to study these differences. Also, there are different Dhammacakkappavattana suttas. If there is a, I think it's a PhD study where a thesis about the different Dhammacakkappavattana suttas. There are more than 17 types, and sometimes they are rendering this first teaching, the first discourse of the Buddha. There is a morning period and the afternoon period. So there are in Chinese version we can find very interesting aspects of the first discourse of the Buddha. So the Chinese canon is, we have also Vinaya Sutra and the Abhidharma, and this is mostly considered as translation from Sanskrit. But now there are some researchers were considering that, for example, the Prajnaparamita Sutras were more coming from Chinese and then retranslated into Sanskrit. So, for example, the famous Heart Sutra from the linguistic viewpoint seems that its first was in Chinese, and then because of the linguistically research and examining the structure of the Sanskrit text, it seems that it was translated from Chinese into Sanskrit. So these are questions how it was first Sanskrit and then Chinese, or Chinese and Sanskrit. So this is also an interesting thing. And then we have the Tibetan canon where we don't find Abhidharma. So the three baskets there is Vinaya Sutra and Tantra. This is a specialty of the Tibetan canon. Of course, we find tantric texts, many tantric texts, mainly Dharani texts in the Chinese canon, but they are mostly connected to Abhidharma, so they are not like a separate basket like in Tibetan canon. So whenever we go now, we find the translations of these three canons. So, for example, if we go to north, like in Mongolia, Buryatia, then we find the translations of Tibetan canons. Sometimes even they don't translate. So sometimes we find that they use the Tibetan language. So, and sometimes they have also the like Mongolian text also translations, but they use the Tibetan canon. And for example, in Japan, in Vietnam, in some countries, they mostly use the translations coming from the Chinese, the Beijing canon, and then all the other countries, Buddhist countries, are using the Pali canon. So we have these three main sources. So let's see just very shortly. I'm really not expert of Pali canon, but how the Vinaya text, you know much better than me, the containing the monastic rules, the Sutta Vivanga, Kandaka, Parivara, and then also Sutta Vivanga, the Bhikkhu and the Bhikkhuni Vivanga, and then also the Kandaka, the Mahavagga Pali, Chulavagga Pali. These texts are very valuable sources of not just the monastic codes, but many stories. For example, we were translating from Pali the Jivaka stories, and also the Jivaka Sutta is very interesting. But here in in the Pali Canon, in the Vinaya sections, we find many valuable sources of also healing methods, herbs, and also a lot of life stories. Also life stories of the Buddha, and also life stories of different other Jivaka, the doctor of the Buddha. So this is the Vinaya Pitaka, but there are a lot of texts, but we can see or try to find the essences, and this is called Chatupparisuddha Sila. So we have actually 4 kinds of Sila. If we put together the text, we can say the Patimokkha Samvara Sila, and then we find also the Patimokkha here, and then also the stories of the different rules, which are really very valuable sources, that all the rules were coming from situations. So the rules were not was coming from some kind of somebody was like deciding or even the Buddha decide, but it all comes from different problems, different situations where the monks were not really, their conduct was not according to the monastic behavior, or they were not according to the middle path. So the Patimokkha Samvara Sila is a monastic discipline code and all the connected stories. Indriya Samvara Sila is morality to restrain senses. This is very important because this is the key for meditation. So when we talk about Sila, for example, the problem here in the West that when we try to do meditations like Satipatthana meditation or Satipatthana Vipassana meditations, then this is, you see, Sila, Samadhi, Panya is connected to the Samadhi. But we need Sila. So this is a very good question that if a lay people would like, a lay person would like to do meditation, then how we can have the Sila? Because we don't have the monastic rules. We have, of course, the five lay people vows, the Panchasila, but it's necessary to clearly understand what does it mean. The Panchasila, because Sila is giving the base for meditation, Sila, and then Samadhi, and then Panya. So there are the 4 points. Because if somebody would really keeping the vows, then of course the first point is remembering the vows all the time. We should remember the vows. If you forget the vows, this is a problem. So the first one is remembering. The second one is always present, being present, because even if I remember the vows, if I don't see that now I do something which is against the vows, if I'm not present, then it's also is creating problems. So the remembering and presence is very important, and then the way of restraint, when the way of not doing something. So it's like a self-control. It's also the third point, which is developed by keeping the vows. And then the fourth point is ahimsa. It means that we don't, we have to do it with a kind of smooth way. It's not like ascetic way. We have to keep the way of ahimsa. So this 4 is very important in meditation. So what I was thinking, because I'm also trying to find out that how meditation can be done in like in our Buddhist college, there are lay people, lay persons. Then I try to develop these 4. So develop, remember, so memories or remembering, because when we do meditation, we forget. In some minutes even or more, we forget what we do. We forget the instructions, the sitting in cross-leg, back straight, and so on, so on. We forget. And the second one, if we don't forget, remember, we don't clearly notice when the mind is distracted. So the second one is presence, to notice, to see when the mind is distracted. The fourth one or the third one is when we are distracted, to come back, to restrain, to control, to come back to the topic. For example, observing the breathing, we find this problem of forgetting the instructions, that now I'm observing the breathing, this is my practice. The second one, I don't notice when starting distraction, I try to singing, think, and then many thoughts are coming. And then if I recognize that now I am distracted, I cannot come back. I cannot come back to the breathing. And then if I want to come back, then there are some people are trying to be punish themselves or putting too much effort of it and then creating tension. So we should use also non-harm or ahimsa. So these 4 points I found very interesting. And then of course, if somebody is keeping the vows, the monastic discipline code, then it naturally comes this four, because we should remember the vows. We should always be present to notice if I do something against or not. And then also we have to restrain, and then also we have to do it in a calm or smooth way. So ahimsa. So Indriya Samvara Sila is, I think, is a morality to restrain the sense. Is a very important topic also for lay people, and this is also a very interesting question, that whether, and mostly in the West, how we can develop sila before we do meditation, because no, here is mostly people are just doing meditation. So that's why it's very important to respecting the triple gem before we do any practice, also doing prostration, so giving frame also for meditation practices. And Ajiva Parisuddhi Sila is morality regarding proper livelihood. These are more connected to the monastic way of livelihood, but it's also very good to translate into our life, because we have also this kind of, we have also have to eat, we have also sleeping and so many things. Like in the fourth one is a special, like a special points of Pachaya Sannyasita Sila, and then now we consider the food and sleeping medicine, and then with the sleeping place. So what is the most necessities that, and this is also very important for lay people, how they eat, how they sleep, and then what about the sickness, and of course how we are having clothes. These are also interesting questions. So this is these four main topics of Vinaya Pitaka, and it has also many wisdom connected to these four topics, which is also valid for us. So then the Suttanta Pitaka, we have the five groups of collections, so the five Nikayas, Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya, Anguttara Nikaya, and Khuddaka Nikaya, and there are many texts. Digha Nikaya, we have 34, the longest sutras, and this is also a very interesting way why the texts were rendered according to the length of the text. So this is also a kind of study. There are many scholars are studying this question, that why the texts were like that. Also, we find it in the Quran, so the Muslim, that they have this kind of longer text. Here also, the collections, the three collections, Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, and the Khuddaka Nikaya, it's okay, it's not very much just very short text, but it's according to the length of the text. I heard, and this is an explanation I heard mainly from Theravada viewpoint, that they say that the long texts are more elaborated, so we have to start with the Digha Nikaya, and then when we understand the long discourses are more elaborated, the topic, then we can find also the Majjhima Nikaya is more condensed, and then we go to the very short text. Now, according to the historical studies, it seems that the Samyutta Nikaya and the Anguttara Nikaya are the oldest collections, and it's also an interesting story when the Buddha was visiting with Sariputta, the funeral of the founder of the Jain sect, Mahavira, and the Saripati was asking the question that here in now the leader of the Jaina school is passing away, that what about his legacy, what about his teachings, how they are putting together the teachings. And then the Buddha said it's not clearly understood. And then the Sariputta was asking that how we should do after the passing of the teacher. And then the Buddha said that according to the numbers. So So this is also this is in Anguttara Nikaya. So in Anguttara Nikaya, we find that from 1 to 11, there are the different texts are connected, like when there was one topic or two topics, or so that's why it's called the collection of gradual discourses. There are very, very interesting different teaching suttas, short text also in Anguttara Nikaya. And the other one is a Samyutta Nikaya, which is according to topics. So there are different samyuktas. We know very much, as we know. So collection of kind of discourses. So, for example, if you want to find anything about dependent origination, then you go then and check the Samyutta Nikaya, what different texts are connected to dependent origination, or the five standards, or the seven topics of enlightenment, or um, Sattabojjhanga. Then you can go to the samyuttas and then to find those texts. So this is an easy way to research. So this is a good question, that if we say that there is the Anguttara Nikaya, Samyutta Nikaya, one is according to the numbers, one is according to the topics, then the others are what was the purpose of or putting them together into the three categories according to the land. In Khuddaka Nikaya, we have many, many texts. Some in as I remember, Burmese collection, we have 18, sometimes 15 different collections, like Dhammapada, Udana, and so on, so on. Irigata, and there are many, many. Also, there is connected to the Petas or the Vimana. So there are many, many interesting texts in Khuddaka Nikaya we can find, and there are a lot of. So when we see the numbers, then in Majjhima Nikaya we have 152 different suttas. Samyutta we have almost 3,000. According to also the commentaries are even more. And in Anguttara Nikaya there are many, many, many different texts. So this is the Sutta Pitaka is connected to the five Nikayas, and then are also what are the main topics of Sutta Pitaka. So one topic is the Buddha's teaching about karma and rebirth, and this is a kind of starting point of understanding the Buddhist teaching, that what is karma, because what we experience first, this is the starting point of our path, is karma. Of course, we cannot clearly see the way of karma, how is it, but this is a starting point of understanding and karma and rebirth. Even in some Tibetan texts, it is said that this is like a necessary. In Buddhist teaching, we don't find very much saddha or shraddha, so faith. So if we talk about faith, like these five factors connected to like the pancha bala, pancha indriya, then we have the saddha or shraddha, the faith is starting point. But it's not like blind faith. But it is said in Tibetan sources that we should somehow believe in rebirth. So is Upajati, so rebirth, because even we don't experience, even we are, there is no proof for that, but this is kind of starting point. Because if we don't believe in rebirth and karma, then we cannot talk about samsara. And then if you don't understand what is samsara, then how we talk about liberation from samsara? So then we don't understand the base. There are some schools in Buddhism, mostly in Zen Buddhism, where they don't accept the manifold rebirths or the endless rebirths in a cycle of samsara, the cyclic existence. It's interesting that why they do that. Actually, according to the explanation, because they wanted to focus very much on the present life and the present situation. That's why that's why they are considering this. So it's kind of a Zen way of turning the mind upside down and out, inside out. But we can say that for the proper view, we need the understanding of karma and rebirth, so understanding samsara, and then we can find many lectures or many teachings of the Holy Buddha, which we can find in the Sutta Tapitaka. And of course, one of the most difficult topic is the five aggregates, the Panchakanda. Um, Not so easy to understand that, and also not so easy to recognize in meditation because it's very fast how the process of the pancha kanda, so the five aggregates, the five skandhas are operating. But this is also a very important starting point, as we see even in the first teaching of the Buddha, Dhammacakkappavattana, we find that the first noble truth. Then is also the different levels of suffering the Buddha is explaining, and then it says in the altogether it is the attachment of the five aggregates, so the five attachments, so connected to the five aggregates. So if you want to understand that what is the reality of suffering, what is the reality of dukkha, then we have to also understand what is the five aggregates, and also we can find in the second teaching the Anatalakkhana Sutta, immediately we find the five aggregates. So this is a key topic in the Sutta Pitaka. And then dependent origination, Paticca Samutpada, Praticca Samutpada is, there are different, sometimes 9, some also there is the Nidana Sutta, when we can find a very interesting explanation. It's very deep and even very difficult to understand, but this is one of the main topic of the suttas, dependent origination. This is a deeper level of understanding karma and rebirth, because karma and rebirth, when we see, then we start and go to the causes. We also from five aggregates you go to the causes, but independent origination is opposite way. From the cause of ignorance is coming the different steps, and then at the end we find suffering, at the end of birth and old age and sickness and death. At the end we find. So this is also very, very big field of study. What is dependent origination? How things are dependent? And this was also a question of the different philosophies. So when we find, for example, Madhyamaka or even with the Sautrantika philosophies, they were all discussing about the karma and dependent origination. For example, the question that if in a previous life, a previous incarnation is doing something, that why I now in this life I experience the result, how is it coming to previous life to next life, so how is it working? And this is not so easy. And then also in dependent origination, this is the question. And then of course karma and the causes of karma is also the question, that how karma and the causes are related, and then who is experiencing, for example, if the there is not a continuation of like mind, like in a Hindu tradition of when you talk about that something is going, then how the karma is working, how dependent origination is working, and how cause and effect are connected. So then, of course, we have the Bhavana, Kammatthana. So many discourses of the Buddha is talking about meditation. Like we have many connected to Satipatthana. We have also many texts which is not so clearly saying the Vipassana, but it's connected to wisdom. Vipassana is when we clearly see the nature of things, when we clearly see the nature of the dhammas, so Kammatthana and Bhavana meditation, and then of course the Four Noble Truths, Dharya, so noble truths, so noble reality. If we see how in history the Buddhist commentaries are developed, then we can see very interesting also aspects because, for example, if you see the Visuddhimagga, then it's based on Sila Samadhipanya. So it seems that that time the most important way of seeing the Buddha teaching, the Dhamma Vinaya or the Buddha Dhamma Vinaya, that was according to the canon, how the Vinaya and the Siddhanta and Abhidhamma, so the Sila Samadhipanya. And then in some later periods, the more philosophical aspects of connecting, they were rendering the teaching according to the five aggregates. We find some philosophical schools, Abhidharma schools, where the way of putting all teachings were according to the five aggregates. And then, of course, the dependent origination. And it seems that now, again, the Four Noble Truths is one of the key to understand essentially the whole purpose of the teaching of the Buddha. So, for example, the book of Payutto, Venerable Payutto, is the Buddha Dhamma is according to the Four Noble Truths, and this is really a huge work, and rendering all the teachings of the Buddha according to four realities, the four levels of reality or four noble truths. So it was many times was like a question of time that how they were rendering, how they were putting together the teachings, what was the what was the base for explaining the teaching of the Buddha. And then you see one way is like Karma, Dhamma, Nibbana. So this was also a kind of explanation we find, for example, in the rice plant um, Shilastamba Sutra. This is the early Mahayana Sutra. That the Buddha is saying that if you see dependent origination, you see the Dharma. If you see the Dharma, then you see the Buddha. So that was a kind of education system or teaching system according to dependent origination of or karma, dharma, and Buddha, or karma, dharma, nirvana. This was also a very interesting way to put together the teachings, and it seems, and it's very interesting that one time also His Holiness Dalai Lama was asked that what is now the main point of the teaching, which is the way to see the whole teaching of the Buddha, and he said it's like turning back again to the source, so again the Four Noble Truths. And it seems that again the Four Noble Truths is starting to be again the way of the most important frame of seeing all the teachings. And in sometimes, for example, in a Tibetan system, sometimes the Four Noble Truths was like the starting point of teaching, and sometimes also we find that that is kind of basic teachings. But if we see, for example, the Pali text, the Buddha never taught Four Noble Truths for lay people. So it's a very deep understanding. And if we consider that that was the first teaching of the Buddha, we can also say that these truths, the Four Noble Truths, are the more or the most or the closest truth to enlightenment, because that was the first teaching. So I also have this kind of problem in the West that they consider, and this is because of the Tibetan way of understanding, that they consider that this is like a starting point of the teaching, can be, but this is really the first teaching of the Buddha. This is the first manifestation from enlightenment. His enlightenment, his awakening. Of course, we know that there were some Udanas, but this is the first. So in my understanding, I feel this is one of the deepest teaching of the Buddha is the Four Noble Truths. That's why it was the first one, and that is why that Kozanya was enlightened during that teaching, because it's so deep, it's so close to enlightenment that it was giving the possibility to be enlightened immediately. So that is why I was putting into this the main topics, the five main topics of Satanta, and the end, the Four Noble Truths, because it seems that Yes, this is really one of the most valuable teaching of the Buddha, and we cannot find even something which is close to that level of teaching in other traditions. So then we have the Pali canon. In the Pali canon, the Abhidhamma, the collection of higher Dhamma, Abhidhamma, and the seven books. In some stories, it is said it's coming from the Tayatimsa heaven, when the Buddha was visiting his mother and teaching for 7 days the Abhidhamma. So there are different way of the stories of how Abhidhamma is appeared on this planet, how it manifested, or how it was putting together. Somebody said that this is we can thank to Sariputta. And then in Abhidhamma we find many words, many like points, and then it's very mathematical aspect of seeing the connections of the different dhammas. But and also in our college, we have to see very much what are the essences, the essential points of Abhidhamma. If somebody want to study Abhidhamma, of course, this is a huge corpus of texts. Not so easy to read this kind of lists of different terms, but but if we understand that the main purpose of Abhidhamma is understanding or realizing anatta, seeing clearly anatta as the nature of all phenomena, as we see that sabbe sankara anicchati, sabbe sankara dukkati, and sabbe dhamma anatta, then this anatta is at the end. This is the aim of Abhidhamma text. But if we see that where is why is called Sabedhamma, so why Dhamma, why it's not Sankara? Because Nibbana is not Sankara, so that's why it's called Dhamma. Nibbana is also Anatta. So if we see that from the Anatta is we can find that there are the samsaric or the Sankara, so composed phenomena, and there is Nibbana. And then what are the composed phenomena? The Sankara is made of Rupa and Nama. And then we can find Rupa sections. And then what is Nama? Nama has two aspects, Chitta, so mind, and Chittasika, mental factors. So if we understand from this viewpoint the Abhidhamma, that is anatta, and anatta in there is in Sankara or in Dhamma. So there's a nibbana and compounded phenomena. Compounded phenomena come nama rupa, and the nama is chitta chittasika. Then we can understand that this is the main four topics of Abhidhamma. So rupa chittasika chitta nibbana. Of course, when somebody is going deeper, then we can find the 11 types of rupa, and then the 54, 51 types of different renderings of chittasika, and then the different kinds of chitta. And then also we have also teaching and information about nibbana. So this way, it's also here in our college is very important because the students are learning Pali, of course, but not that deep level that they could read the text from Pali. So that's why it's necessary here to see the essential points of the Vinaya Pitaka, the four main points, and those the five topics of Suttanta, and also these 4 points of Abhidhamma, because then they can understand that how the whole teachings of the Buddha can be seen, that what are the essential points, what are the essences, and then we can understand what is the purpose of these Vinaya Pitaka, Sutta Pitaka, and Abhidhamma Pitaka. So now, after the Pali Canon and the Chinese Buddhist Canon, we can see this table. So there are also in Chinese Tripitaka text, which is not part of the Theravada canon, the Pali canon. These are the Mahayana texts. So in northern Buddhism, we can find this kind of seeing the teachings according to Mahayana Hinayana. And this Hinayana term is called lesser vehicle. And this is a very bad translation because it seems that they are not one of is higher or not. It's not about that. So when there is a kind of definition. When we talk about yana as a vehicle is called a path or a teaching system of the Buddha yana, which is going from the beginning to the end. So whenever we say yana is a complete teaching of the Buddha, it's a complete path from the samsara to nibbana. So from the samsaric situation, from suffering, from the different obstacles of mind to the full enlightenment. So that is why in a Tibetan translation, it's sometimes they translate Hinayana, but actually they call it Sosoritekpa, individual liberation. So they call it because in the teaching of, for example, in Palikano, is giving the very important methods for liberating. In a Theravada teaching, there is the viewpoint is going in, and then at the end, understanding the fake nature of atta, I, and then attaining liberation through anatta. And this is the path how from the monastic rules, keeping the monastic rules, and then practicing meditation, we attain the pure view, seeing clearly things as it is, and then seeing the I, and then this way realizing anatta, and then liberation comes, different levels of enlightenment. So that's why we don't use the term Hinayana, we use Theravada, but in the historical way of when we are like seeing this kind of here is this table, then we should understand that this here is individual liberation. It means so it's not a kind of lesser or small or something. It is about the how I can go through in going in through meditation and then through vipassana clearly see anatta. So that's important. Why? Because Mahayana, why it's called Mahayana? Because Mahayana is using the space. So it's using this many Buddhas, many life, many beings. So it's using this multiple things. That this is a method. For example, when we are doing prostration in a Theravada system, we usually do 3 prostrations, like respecting the triple gem, and then we do prostration. And then at the end, again, we do. But in Mahayana system, the prostration is a complete practice. So there are 4 points in Mahayana. Then all the practices are antidotes of something. That's why we repeat. So, for example, in a Theravada retreat, usually there is the walking meditation, sitting meditation, walking meditation, sitting meditation. So it's a movement, no movement, movement, no movement. In Zen or in Mahayana tradition, they do prostration and then sitting and also walking and prostration. Many prostration, because it's a kind of training for the body also, but it's giving antidote of pride. Because when we bow down, this is a kind of antidote of ego. This is pride, or when we feel we have a great realization or something. Because we bow down, we are respecting the Buddha, we are respecting the realized beings. So there, again, the many, so repeating many times, and sometimes they do even in Chan Buddhism, there was someone, Suan Hua, who lived for 120 years, and he was bringing Chan one lineage from the China to the United States, and he was doing 5,000 prostration a day. So prostration, sitting, prostration, sitting, prostration, sitting. So here in Mahayana, we have many these kind of practices like mantra recitation, many millions of times. So this is why it's called Maha, because it's here in Mahayana is endless space used. We visualize huge. We repeat many. And in Mahayana teachings, we can find this kind of always in numbers that if you do 3 times, 4 times, many times, things that there is very important. We cannot find it in Theravada system, this kind of methods. And this is very important when for example, a Theravada practitioner meets a Mahayana practitioners, they understand that how is one practitioner is like going to enlightenment and how the other one is going, because this way, if we don't understand, then we are really here also in the college. Sometimes if somebody is a Mahayana practitioner, they don't understand why they sit and observing the breath. And then if somebody is more connected to Theravada teachings and seeing the very important of being present, very simple practices, they don't understand why what they are doing, why they are doing mantra recitation, why they are visualizing Amitabha, why they are reciting many things. So it's interesting. Of course, if in Mahayana somebody is not aware, not present, and not so, then it's really a big question that how it can be developed. So that is why we can find this kind of renderings, and of course we use instead of Hinayana we use Theravada, but in ancient times there were many like individual liberation schools where they were concerning being going into the monasteries and then going to retreats, and then in retreat during meditation that attaining realization. So then you can see that many texts, different texts are connected, and here in Chinese canon, we have the Sutra Vinaya Dharma. There are sometimes, and also we can find in the Chinese canon the commentaries. You see Indian and Chinese commentaries mostly. And in the Chinese canon, you see there are many different sections. The agamas are mostly are the same as what we find in Pali Canon. So we can find these most important suttas. Also in Khuddaka Nikaya, we have the Jataka, so the birth stories. This is also an important aspect, or you see the second main corpus of the Chinese canon. And then comes the Prajnaparati of perfection of wisdom sutras. They have so these coming from the 120,000 shlokas, and then it's connected. This whole corpus of Prajnaparamita is the transcendent wisdom is about how the different dhammas have the nature of shunyata, so how the different dhammas are empty. And it's coming from the longer text to the shorter text. So this is the same as it was one explanation, as I mentioned, connected to the Dika Nikaya and the Majjhima and the Khuddaka, that is coming to more essential way. So what is interesting that, for example, the Diamond Sutra is, as I remember, 320 lines of Prajnaparamita Sutra, but there is the 120,000 lines, and there are 18,000 lines, 8,000 lines. So this is in the title of the sutras, we can find mostly the number of lines contained in the text, except in the Vajracchedika Sutra, so the Diamond Sutra, which is 320 lines, and also the Heart Sutra, the Prajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra, which is 42 lines. sometimes this sutra, this 42-line sutra, which is the most famous sutra of the Northern Buddhism or Mahayana Buddhism, it's used as a mantra. Sometimes it's described as in a shape of a stupa. It was kind of seal and and recited also when there was problems. It's like it's very similar to like a paritta text, which is dispelling negativities. Why? Because wisdom, when we see clearly things are dispelling all negativities. And then in these sutras and also the Mahayana sutras, we always find mantras. So, like in the Mahaprajnaparamita Hridaya Sutra, we find this Rupam Shunyata Shunyatya Rupam. This is not considered mantra, but later it became mantra. Rupa, like the form is empty, emptiness is form. And at the end is Gate Gate Para Gate Parasam Gate Bodhi Swaha, which is giving a kind of key for this text also, and then the development in this wisdom practices, which is connected, of course, vipassana, clearly seeing things as they are. Gate, paragate, parasamgate, bodhi, swaha. So this is a kind of mantra of the path. So there are many practices connected to this mantra, also in retreat and so on. And what is interesting that at the end of the Prajnaparamita corpus text, we have the sutra of the one letter. This is one of the shortest sutra because the Buddha was proclaiming the first sound. This is the essence of Prajnaparamita, the sound of the first sound. So, of course, here the reading should be from the longer and then at the end understanding, because if you first read just the Buddha was saying then you don't understand what is that the first sound, what is represented. But it's, if you read well, then it's this is containing all the 22,000 lines knowledge as well. And then there is the famous Lotus Sutra, which was in Mahayana system is considered the last teaching because before the Mahaprajnaparamita Sutra. Even someone is saying that this was later the last teaching of the Buddha Sadhama Pundarika, the Lotus Sutra. And there are some schools which is based like Tiantai Tendai, which is based on this sutra very much. And of course, there is mantra of the Lotus Sutra. And then another school in China, Avatamsaka, is a garland, flower garland, or Avatamsaka school is considering the Mahayana system that when the Buddha was enlightened during that 49 days, that time was proclaimed the Avatamsaka Sutra. They consider that this is the first teaching. So it's very interesting in Mahayana. One school is considering that this is the first teaching or first thing what happens in 49 days. This is a very, very long, the longest sutra in Mahayana system, Avatamsaka. And the other school is Tiantai Tendai is considering the Lotus Sutra as the most important, the last. And then the Ratnakuta is also one sutra, and then the Nirvana Sutra. So here it's interesting because it's one sutra are one section of the canon in Mahayana, in Chinese canon. Nirvana Sutra is a Parinirvana Sutra. And then there are the collections, the collective great collection. And then here, there is also in Chinese canon the Tantra teachings, Tantra collections, many texts about mantras. So it's very short text usually, and they are talking about the Buddha Shakyamuni was proclaiming the mantra, and this is so also now it's not so easy to understand how it was practiced. But there is, of course, there's a Vinaya section, the monastic discipline, and then sutra explanations. These are more commentaries. And then here is Abhidharma, text of Abhidharma. And here we can find also the two main Mahayana philosophical systems connected texts. They are, of course, connected to the explanations. So the commentaries, the Madhyamaka text, mostly connected to Nagarjuna, Yogacara, Asanga, Vasubandha, and so on. and then treatise, Shastra, and there are also the explanations of Sutra and explanation of Vinaya. So this is how the Chinese canon was put together. There are different versions, but this is also connected to the three baskets. And here, for example, we find in Pali the Dikha, Dikha the long is Dirga in Chinese, or translated Dharma Buttaka. And Buddhayasas, it's interesting that if you see the schools, there are also, we can find in the Chinese translation, different, from different Tripitakas, we can find translations. Mostly the Chinese Tripitaka, the texts are connected or translated from the Sarvastivada Tripitaka, but that Tripitaka is the original one is lost. It is saying that mostly this is contained in the Chinese canon, how the Mula Sarvastivada Tripitaka is considered as contained in the Tibetan canon. But this is also not so easy to study this topic, that how different Tripitakas were mixing and then how they were translated. So, but there are some scholars who are studying this. So, of course, Majjhima is Madhyama in Sanskrit, Samyukta is Samyukta, and Anguttara is Ekottara. Ekottara is called one by one. So it's going to Ekottara. It's said it's the question mark is it's the Ekottara Agama is because sometimes in instead of Nikayas in Mahayana they call Agamas. This is a Mahasangika from Tipitaka, but it's a good question. And now we can see also the Tibetan canon. It's altogether 1,118 texts. And then the Dulva is the Vinaya text, it's 8 texts. This is connected to the monastic conduct. And then again, how we can see in the Chinese canon, we have the Prashambaramita corpus, so 36 texts connected to this Shepchin, or perfection of wisdom. And here we can find also the Vajrachadika, so the Diamond Sutra, and also the Heart Sutra. And then the whole section of Avatamsaka, as I said, this is the longest sutra in Mahayana corpus. And again, we find Ratnakuta is a collection of Mahayana texts. It's 49 different sutras are connected. And then there comes the sutras. Here you see that means collection or section, though is sutra. We find just 266 sutras. So we can see in the next slide that what is the difference between the three main canons. And then there is a Mahaparinirvana Sutra, is this whole section, one text, that sutra. And there are the tantras. As I said here, the Tripitaka is coming like Vinaya and the Sutra and then Tantra. So we have in the canon, we have this 472 kind of tantric texts. And then also the Nyingma Jude, they were accepting from the Nyingma system also 19 old tantras, they are old translations. And then the Kalachakra commentary is also a tantric text. Is the last tantric teaching, the Kalachakra. There is also astrological systems coming from the Kalachakra teachings. There are also yogas, and also dance is connected to this system. Sometimes when His Holiness Dalai Lama is giving initiation of Kalachakra, then we can see this kind of, it's very slow movement, dance of Kalachakra. And there are the mantra collection, and there are the Mullam aspiration prayers. This is very important in Mahayana, always, like in Tatana Sutta or the Metta Sutta, always to have wishes or aspiration prayers. So there was a disciple of Guru Rinpoche Kavapaltsak. He was one of the main figure of the when translating the ancient texts, and then Vairochana also. And then later, what I mentioned, the Bhutan Rinchen, who was really putting together the canon. It's called Kanjur and Tanjur in Tibetan. So the Kanjur is containing 108 volumes, and they are the words of the Buddha. But then, of course, we can see in the Tibetan canon there are also the tantras there, and also the Mahayana sutras. They consider as the words of the Buddha and Buddha Vajana, and that is the Tanjur. Tanjur is there, the commentary 227, as I remember, volumes. It's really a huge collection of text. These are the different treatises, the commentaries, and connected to philosophical systems also, and tantras. So here we can see that if we see or compare the Tibetan canon with like, for example, the Theravada canon, there are less agamas, so less nikayas. We don't find, you see 266 sutras in the collections, and then of course there is the big sutras of so much less sutras we find. So the basket of sutra is comparing 7,000 or 2,000 to compare this 260 is really not much. There is no Abhidharma, Pitaka in the Tibetan canon. There are a lot of treatises in the Tanjurs or commentaries, but there is no separate Abhidharma collection of texts. But there is the Tantric Yu in Tibetan section in the canon. And there is also Mahavyutpati, which is a kind of vocabulary. It's multi-language. There is Sanskrit, Tibetan, sometimes Chinese. So this is a dictionary. And of course, the High Tantra, the Anuttara Tantras, which is a specialty of the Tibetan canon, because we don't find these tantras in the Chinese canon. So you can see here the number of texts according to the different editions. There is the Tibetan canon of the Peking edition. There is a Derge edition, Eastern Tibet. Urga is a Mongol edition, the Nartang, and different. They were different printing places where they were printing the Tibetan canon, and sometimes there are differences, as you see. In Tibet, there was a tradition to reading the canon, so sometimes it took 3 days. They were continuously reading the canon. So even there was a tradition that they were inviting practitioners to read the whole canon. And then for 3 days, 5 days, something, this practitioner was invited to, for example, a noble family house, and then of course many collection books if they had the canon, of course, and was loudly reading, and it was considering as a blessing. We will see why, because this is the teaching of the Buddha. That's what we have now. So they were considering the great blessing of the Tripitaka, and this is also a tradition in when a Tibetan temple is consecrated. There is a separate ceremony for like the empty place of the temple, and then now they put the canon inside. So there are some statues representing the Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, but then also when they are the canon is coming, and then they were like putting there on the both sides of the main main altar, the canon. This is the great blessing is coming, because the Buddha, speech of the Buddha, the teaching of the Buddha is now filling the whole temple. So this is a nice ceremony. So the differences between the three canons. So in as you know very well, in Pali Canon we don't have the Mahayana text, which is in the northern, and the Tantric text, which is which is not containing. Of course, there is the Yogavachara school, which is considered, I don't know in Thailand as well, but in the West, it is considered a kind of tantric Theravada. And there is the Vimuttimagga text is connected to that, but they are not considered as canonical texts in a Theravada system. But we have the Chinese translation of the Vimuttimagga. And in Chinese canon, then missing many suttas, which is we can find in the Theravada canon, missing also the high tantras, which is contained in the Tibetan canon. And as I said, there are 4 versions, for example, of Satipatthana. In the Tibetan canon, also missing many suttas, so missing agamas. What is very interesting that in Tibetan canon there are some text which is translated from Chinese, even though they consider it translated from Sanskrit, but they are clearly, that is translated from Chinese. And there is 11 text which is translated from Pali. I tried to find out how they were like that how it came that they could translate from Pali, but I don't know about 11 texts, but not there. We don't find the translation of Satipatthana and Anapana. So, and we don't find also in the Chan text. So the Zen text is not containing, and also the Atamsaka commentaries. And it's always a good question why. So it's how it is what's coming. Sometimes we see that it can be also political reasons because of this historical problem between Tibet and China, and then that's why, for example, there is no commentary to Avatamsaka Sutra, which is one of the most important sutra in the Chinese canon, even when there is a separate school connected to Avatamsaka. So now there is a new style also in Tibetan teaching, so they try to again to put back or to again some schools were keeping secret the Chan texts. So and now they are revealing again the different Chan or Zen texts. So, but it's a very sudden or a very interesting that we don't find Satipatthana and Anapanna, which is one of the most important two meditation suttas in the Pali Canon, and it's also one of the most important methods of meditation. So it's interesting. For example, when I was talking with Tibetans and sometimes with the Mongols, I was saying that one of the basic meditations is observing the breath, and they didn't know what's that. So that's really interesting. They have also counting the breath and the 6 practices of the Dharma, six aspects of the gate of Dharma, or when there's counting the breath, following the breath, and so on. But they are more very deep practices. But even observing the breath and the 16 steps of how it is written in the Anapanasati Sutta or the 4 ways of Satipatthana, they have a practice of Drempanyershak, so it's kind of a Satipatthana, but this text is purely connected to the method of Vipassana. So in that text, of course, there is also the 4 bases, but they don't observe the 4 bases, but they are trying to research if there any I in the body, if there any I in the sensation or Vedana, if there any I in Chitta, in the mind, if there any I in the Dhammas or Dharmas, in the phenomena. So it's a very different approach. And also the sutra is different or differs from the Satipatthana. So this is interesting that how the different canons are containing texts. Of course, the most complete is Theravada canon. This is the biggest corpus of canon. But it's very interesting to study also the Chinese and the Tibetan canon. There is the Tai Su, the Chinese master, is quotation from here that if somebody is knowing the Pali Tipitaka and also have a knowledge of Chinese Tripitaka and then knowing this Yogacara Madhyamaka system and also the Yoga, Supreme Yoga, so the Tantric system of what is written in the Tibetan canon, then it says have a little difficulty in gaining an accurate, complete, and comprehensive panorama of the 1,700 years. This was of course not now, because now we can say 2,500 years of development of Indian Buddhism. So it's if of course if somebody has time, even studying the Pali Canon is a very very huge task, but it's also very good to just look also and see the other two canons, because we can understand many things about how the Buddhist schools are developed and so on. And now let's see that why is it so important that we have Tipitaka, because when the Buddha passed away, so when the Buddha was here, then the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha was reality. So that's why it's refuge, because we take refuge what is reality. The Buddha, the Holy Buddha is seeing clearly as it is all the phenomena as it Tathagata, and there are many, many qualities, Arahana, Sammasambuddho, and then also the Vijjacharana Sampanno, and so on, the 9 qualities of the Buddha. But when the Buddha passed away, then it's a question that what is the source, what is the refuge, how we can decide different problems in the Sangha. So that is why the canon is like representing the Buddha, because this is the canon, the Tipitaka is representing, or the collection of the teachings of the Holy Buddha. And so we can say the canon is our refuge. We can go back always, we can also study always, we can also check our development according to the text of the Buddha. And this is also very important, that these texts are rendered in a very clear steps according to the path, very clear steps according to the practice of Sila, Samadhi, and Panya. So Vinaya Sutta Abhidhamma is just this three. If just say Vinaya Sutta and Abhidhamma, this is also a teaching. Because through these teachings, through understanding the purpose of the Vinaya text and the purpose of Sutta and Abhidhamma, then we can understand that by this, or applying the knowledge what is contained in this Tipitaka, we can eliminate the causes of suffering. So mostly they say that as we started also, the causes of suffering, the desire, hatred, ignorance, and the Vinaya Pitaka is containing the knowledge and also containing the methods, different silas, as we said, as we saw before, how to deal with desire, how to eliminate desire. And of course, the monastic code, the purpose of monastic code is how to turn away from samsara, how to eliminate desire, and this is the one of the key of turning away from samsara and turning inside, which is the key for eliminating desire. And then it is said that the Sutta Pitaka is mostly the antidote for hatred and how to find a calm state of mind. And the Napidama is connected to knowledge, to the higher Dhamma, knowing the whole phenomena, even they are samsara, nirvana, nibbana, the whole phenomena is understanding, and this is the way, and this is knowledge also, a method to connected method to eliminate ignorance. So this is very important, that the whole Tipitaka is not just a collection of texts, but this is like a teaching of the Buddha, and it's helping us to liberate from samsara, helping us to have refuge, and also helping us to eliminate the causes of suffering. It's like, according to the Four Noble Truths, it's a desire, hatred, and ignorance. And it's also very important that it's said that the Buddha Dharma Sangha is mostly in the northern Buddhist texts we can find. They are connected to so the Sangha is like the body, and then it's connected to the rules, how we conduct, how we behave with our body. And then the discourses are the speech of the Buddha, the talking, teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha was saying with his mouth, and this is the speech. And then Abhidharma is not spoken because it's connected to mind. So this is also in some in the practices very important that whenever we do practice, we always practice with the three gates. How in Satipatthana also Kayanussati, Vedanussati, and Chittanussati, that this is the Kaya Vedana Chitta or Kaya Vakka Chitta in Sanskrit, the body, speech, and mind. That this is also a very important. And of course, that ruling the body is more connected to Vinaya text, how to eat, how to sleep, how to wear, how is medicine, so how to behave. And then, of course, the speech is more connected to the suttas, or the speech, and then it's and then it is connected with three trainings on the path, which gives a key for traversing on the path, and also which gives a key for how we the step-by-step development. So when, of course, as somebody is entering the monastic sangha, first the sila is the most important. The learning the monastic rules, learning also how to live as a monk, and then from this comes meditation, because as I said, there are these 4 points, which is very important in meditation. Then it naturally comes the capacity to sit more and more and more, and this way to the developing kind of awareness, developing self-control, and then the capacity to control the mind, because the mind has many, many different thoughts, emotions, and also the body has a lot of kind of instincts and so on, to control the mind. And this way we can see what is reality. That this way we can have the panya, the wisdom. So for me, it's a kind of really, I can say just this is really amazing. That the whole canon, the whole text is really huge. The whole canon is giving the key for how to eliminate the causes of suffering, also giving a key to how to develop or how to practice with the body, speech, and mind. So the three gates, and also is giving the steps of the path of the Sila Samadhi and Panya. And so this way, reading the canon is really, really giving a great opportunity to awaken, to understand things. So when we do meditation, it's very interesting that there are some schools when they say that actually the Tripitaka, so the teaching of the Buddha, is also, there are some essential way we can see in meditation. And then one is saying that, so the Vinaya, the proper conduct, so the Sila is connected to the proper posture. Why? Because even though we say that in Visuddhimagga that we are folding the two legs and keeping back straight, and there is explanation why, it's more connected to controlling ourselves. So the proper posture is also can give it's kind of like a rule, and here in the West where we don't have 227 rules. This is very important that to giving rules, so giving some frame from for the practice, giving some rules to gain to have these 4 points of remembering the instruction, then being present, and then controlling the problem when the mind distracted, controlling, coming back to the object of meditation, and of course, and doing it in a non-harmful way. So the proper posture is a very good key for developing this. And it's some schools, meditation schools, it's not so important, but in the northern schools, like in Mahayana and also in Tibetan schools, and also in the Zen, it's very, very important, the proper posture. There are sometimes for shamatha, they call the 5 body posture, the 5-point posture. Like they say that folding the legs is eliminating the mind wandering. Like crossing the legs is eliminating to have this kind of memories are coming in the mind. And then having the proper position of the hands is eliminating doing actions in the mind. The proper position of the tongue is eliminating the inner chatter. And then the proper position of the eye is eliminating the distracted vision, distracted thoughts. So here they use the posture as a kind of rule, as a kind of self-discipline, as a kind of vinaya. And it is said that if somebody has a strong vinaya, so strong realization what is in Vinaya, so the proper conduct and the self-control, then it's you can see also on the posture when it has this kind of back straight folded legs, and then it's a great giving a great presence. And then the samatha, which is like eliminating the anger, and also it's attaining so samatha it means the quiet place, or as we translate calm abiding in Tibetan. Shine means also peace, na means place, the peace, attaining peace is more connected to the second basket of the Buddha. It's more connected to the, like you see, sila, samadhi, and panya. And in meditation, vipassana, through the way of vipassana, we attain panya, we attain wisdom. And it's also interesting that the practice itself, vipassana, is this higher. In Tibetan, the Tibetan were translating la means higher, passati means seeing. But I like very much the translation of not higher, but it's broad. So V is like broad, spacey. So seeing in a very, very open way, or clear, like penetrative insight, usually we translate. So through the posture or the proper behavior, then samatha vipassana also it's connected to these 3 levels of development. Sila, samadhi, panya, also connected to the 3 baskets. So in some traditions, this is a way of approaching the Tipitaka in practice. So as you see, Tipitaka is not just a collection of the text, the holy teachings of the Buddha, but it's also very much connected to what we practice, sila, samadhi, panya, how we develop on the path. With this also in a sitting practices, because also when we sit, we have also the 3 gates. We have also the body, also we have the feelings, and also we have the mind. And these 3 levels are very much connected to the teachings of the 3 baskets. So this is one thing, and also we have very nice explanations of also in a Theravada meditation from Theravada meditation masters, that the samatha is more connected to the head, and then the vipassana is more connected to the heart. And it is also helps us understanding that how we can practice this route. And nowadays, it's also the very important in Theravada system, this Satipatthana meditation, and also it's connected first to the body, so Kayanusati, and then the feelings, Vedanusati, and the Chittanusati, and then of course the Dhammanusati is like a it's a very, very high level. So let's do a little bit of this just to have first the observation of the body and observation of the feelings and observation of the mind, and doing it as a practice. So most important is the back straight, so the body posture, and then it is said that when we are doing samatha, and then also there is the kasina practices, this is one point in concentration. There are many, like in Palikan, we have the 40 objects of concentration. Also, we have also in the Mahayana system, we have also visualization can be also inner object of concentration. There are some systems when there is also concentration without object, so then the space is like an object of meditation. But mostly the concentration practices we find also concentration on the breathing. But in usually when it is connected to shamatha practice, we are focusing here. So between the two eyebrows here at this point, we are concentrating how the breathing is going in, going out, but how we feel here, coldness through inhalation and warmness through exhalation. So we do the body position, observing the breath, observing the body, and then also observing our feelings and observing our mind. And then we start to do concentration just for a few moments, just to have this kind of three levels of practices. So first we just close the eyes. It means that the mind is turning in. We are, instead of thoughts, we are dealing with experiences, sensations, and then feeling the body. Feeling the body as a position, it means that from the top of the head till the toes, we are feeling the whole body. And then, of course, we can control ourselves through the position of the body. When we have the proper position, also we can control the different aspects of wandering mind, acting memories, going, chatter, speech, and then also different thoughts. And then we observe the feelings, pleasurable feelings, neutral feelings, and then also kind of feelings which are more connected to suffering, painful, and then we observe that how is the mind, is it open or closed, space, relaxed, or there is tension in the mind, thinking or feelings. So just observing the three gates, observing the body, observing the feelings, and observing the mind. And then we focus between the eyebrows. And then the main focus is how the breathing is passing the point between the two eyes, the two eyebrows. During shamatha practice, many times the eye starting to be a little bit more open. It's like half closed eye. And then from here, we try to open the mind. Passana means the opening road and seeing things as they are. So this is one way to connect. And then there are, mostly in Zen, we find very interesting explanations about how these three trainings, Sila Samadhi Panya, and how, of course, the corpuses are connected to practice. And one is mostly found in Chan practices is again body posture, because when somebody is in retreat, there is nothing. So in retreat, you have just the body. You cannot keep very much the monastic codes because there is no sangha there. You are alone. So the mostly what you have to control is of course the mind, but through by way of the body. So that is why in this Chan method, the first aspect is connected, of course, again with the body. So here we try to find the balance, like the middle way of the body, and then automatically will manifest the flow of breath. So when the body is in the center, balanced way, relaxed way, we can sit, then we feel that the breathing is starting to be, the feeling of breathing is stronger and stronger. So it's automatically the mind is starting to observe the breathing. And then this is the second aspect. It's connected to the flow. So the flow awareness, continuous presence. The first one is connected to more to balance. They say that this three, the first one is more to the dukkha aspect. The second one is more anicca. So it's first is the balance and then the flow of awareness. And then listening to the sounds of silence. That was in the Chinese meditation system one of the highest practice, which is very, very simple actually. This is connected to mind because the awareness of the ear is like the senses of the awareness of the eyes and the nose and so on. So on, they are connected to the mind aspect. And what is interesting that the hearing the sounds are in the ear we have the organ of balance, and also here is connected to space. So the three levels of the practice here is trying to find the balance of the body, and then you can also move a little bit, and then to try to find it, and then being present in the flow of the breathing, and then hear all the sounds. Sometimes it's called the listening to the silence, but actually, when we listen to the sounds, we never experience silence, because there is also a kind of high pitch of tone starting to manifest. Also, sometimes we also hear the how the pulsation of the blood is in the ear, and so we can hear many things, not just from outside, but inside. And also we can hear our thoughts as well. So this is the Chinese, one of the Chan methods, or the Chinese coming from the Chan, the Chinese meditation systems. There are not so many, but as I remember, 11 or 12 Jnana Suttas. So the whole canon, there are 12 texts which is concerning just with meditation. So first, just try to find with the body posture the balance state, trying to find the center. This is controlling ourselves, always being in the center, not falling to one or other side. And then is coming the flow of the breath. We are present in the continuous inhalation, exhalation, following the breath, continuous presence. And then listening to the sounds, hearing everything, inside, outside. We don't focus on any sounds. We are hearing as everything is back, front, right side, left side, in the space. Trying to listen to all the sounds together, not focusing, being spacey, leaving the mind open. And now we are trying to be in the three experiences of the body, balance, state of the body, controlling the space with the body. Controlling the body is also controlling the mind, and then being present in the flow of the breath and open to listen all the sounds. So this practice is very interesting because it's connected also the three gates of Vipassana, so the Dukkha, Anicca, and Anatta, because it's finding the balance is like you are in the center, you are in a balance that is like going beyond the Dukkha, and the being present is like is experiencing clearly Anicca, the flow of time. And then, of course, when the mind is open, there is no separation between in and out, and this is kind of going beyond atta. So this is connected to anatta. So this is a very, very, for me, it's a very deep practice. And even in there is the Shurangama Sutra in the Mahayana canon, when there was the bodhisattvas were kind of competition that who has the deeper meditation. And then there were some medicine bodhisattvas, the disciples of the medicine Buddha, they say that they can distinguish between 108,000 different tastes. It's connected to medicine. And then one bodhisattva said he is practicing with the eye, practicing with the eyesight, practicing with the vision. And then Avalokiteshvara is saying his practice is listening to the sounds of the word. And then the Buddha is proclaiming that the fastest or the strongest practice of meditation is listening to the sounds. And then in China, there was this tradition of there were different places when you could listen different sounds. And also we find this listening to the sounds in Tibetan practices, in Dzogchen teachings. It's one of the 21 sampling practices. And there is a text, it's called the Drata in Tibetan, which is the transcendental sound, which is very interesting because there the practitioner, the yogi, is listening to the sounds of the elements. And it's not so easy to understand even now because it's a very obscure text, but it's interesting that the sound of the earth element, it's written that how, when you listen to the water, when the wind, and then also the fire, then what is coming, so how, what is manifesting first, and then the second, and so all the path till enlightenment is written in this text. It's called the transcendental sound, Ratalyur. So listening to the sounds is really one of the leading practices was connected to chitta, so mind, from the different, to compare with the different senses. Of course, there are practices connected to different senses, even there are some practices which is used in a Korean university, where 1 hour, the students, every day, 1 hour, they are listening to the smell of the incense. And what is interesting that, of course, the smell is connected to breathing, and they are observing, listening, or trying to feel more and more one pointed way, with presence, the smell, and is developing very much memory and intelligence. So we met the rector of this university, and this is actually is a lay university. The director is a monk, and then he said he put when he was putting this practice into the curriculum of the students, then they felt very much development of the students. So, but listening to the sounds is really a very great practice. And then the last one is also coming from, but this is more connected to Zen. Of course, we don't know that it was existing in Chan or not, but the characteristic of the Zen meditations that they are trying to do together the samatha and vipassana, which is a kind of impossible mission, because when we do samatha, it's one pointedness, is the absence of thoughts, but vipassana, we clearly see reality as it is. So one is one pointed, the other one is more like V, so it's a spacey. But in Zen, the method of Zen is the sudden path. And the characteristic of the sudden path that they are not considering the path as sila, samadhi, panya, so like a step-by-step way of development, but they are trying to practice everything together. It is not so easy to understand also for me, even though I was monk in a Chan community, and this is the southern path, and then Dzogchen is also a southern path is in a Tibetan system, but I really couldn't understand that how is it possible to practice a southern path. And then I understood that in a southern path is not the steps are important, but the gates. So in a southern path, it's called different from the step-by-step, so the gradual path, because in gradual paths we are developing gradually. But in a southern path, we try to find the gate. But the problem is you don't find. So in sometimes it's said that with the southern path, you can develop faster. I don't know, because in the southern path, as I know from my experience, of course you can practice together the sila samadhi panya, but you don't find the gates, even years and years and years and years and years. And then it's a very good question that what to do. And I feel now it's very good also for the Zen practitioners or following the southern path, also to follow the gradual path as well, because then it's a little bit risky that if you find the gate or not find the gate. But there is a interesting practice where the three phases of the breathing is connected to the sila, samadhi, and panya. And I was surprised when I first heard this kind of practice. So in one breathing, we are trying to practice. So when we inhale, we try to inhale naturally. How we inhale naturally? We let the body inhale. So the body is inhaling. It means that not the mind, not I decide that I will inhale, but we let the body inhale. And how we can let the body inhale? The way that after the exhalation, we just let go. We don't inhale immediately. Sometimes it's a problem that also in anapanasati practice or satipatthana, that the mind starting to control the breathing, and to letting go, and then not to let the mind controlling the breathing, inhale, exhale, is when after exhalation, we just let go, we don't inhale immediately and wait. And at one point, the body is starting to inhale, this natural inhalation, and they say that it's connected to Vinaya or Sila. I don't know how, but it's kind of naturality. I don't know. But this is in the explanation. And then when we exhale samadhi, concentration, one pointed. It means that the exhalation is continuous, a little bit slower, and try to be focusing very much on exhalation. And sometimes they are at the end they do this, but we don't do this now. But in, for example, one drop Zen style of teaching or practice, they do this also at the end, the kind of press in the air. We don't do, we just concentrate. And after exhalation, let go, relax in non-duality. Just let everything go. And then wait. And according to this explanation, this is called oral explanation. I don't know it's written somewhere or not, but I was given it when I was translating it. And Zen master, that this practice, inhale naturally, exhale with concentration, samadhi, and then relax in non-duality, is connected to wisdom. So we have just 2 minutes, so let's try this. Trying to find this sila samadhi panya with one inhalation. It's a kind of interesting practice of Zen, and we can understand that what is the Zen approach to practice together sila samadhi and panya, not step by step, but together. But this is a risky way of meditation, because here we don't have the gradual development, but we have to try to find the gate. That's why in Zen we talk about the gates, almost gate of enlightenment, gate of samadhi, and gate of wisdom, for example. So just a few seconds to try to exhale, let the breath dissolve into space, and then waiting, feel the body inhaling. And then the mind is one-pointed during exhalation, so the body is inhaling, the mind is exhaling, and then we go beyond after exhalation, remaining pretty more the non-duality. Because one is the body, inhale, one is the mind with the duality, and then after exhalation, go beyond. This is wisdom, non-duality. So we do a few times this kind of breathing. So I would like to thank you very much for listening to this lecture, and my way of not just giving information, but I always try to do some practices. So this is my way. I like it very much, because also here in our Buddhist college, you know, in the people in the West are very much philosophical. They like very much thinking, but not doing anything. And that's a problem. What I said, that we don't have Vinaya, we don't have Sila. So that's I try to find out that how to give the possibility to also in lay people to practice meditation with the proper Sila, with the proper self control. So thank you very much. And then my final wish is that
Okay, thank you, Professor, to provide giving knowledge to us at today, and thank you very much and your kindness to come and to teach us, and we are appreciate to thank you again. Okay, finally we praying homage the Tibetan James together again. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivate สวากขาโตภะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนัมมัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามิสาธุสาธุสาธุ Thank you everyone and especially Sultan Kya. Thank you from Hungary. Satu.